So welcome to my YouTube channel. That's what we call The Good Life. Today I'm going to be talking about all the jobs that you can be doing in the month of September. If you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so, because you'll get lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year from my allotment, my home garden, and from time to time my home kitchen. Now September is really a glorious time of year, albeit it's a little bit wet today. But today, this month is the month where your hard work finally becomes fruitful, literally, and vegetablefull as well. So it's easy to think all you've got to do is harvest, and while there are loads of things you can be harvesting, and I'm going to be talking about some of the things you can be doing with some of your glorious gluts of fruit and vegetables to keep it really varied, there's also some really important jobs you can be doing, and indeed there are some things you can be sowing as well. So at the end of the video I'm going to be showing you my seeds that I've started off and giving you some ideas of some things you can start off yourself. So one of the jobs I've been doing up the allotment is keeping an eye on pests and predators, just to make sure that my lovely crops are there for me to eat and not for the pests to eat. So something I've been keeping an eye out for, and it's a good time of the day to do it when it's raining, is slugs and snails. There are still slugs and snails, and they do really like things like brassicas, the carrots and the beetroots. So I've been removing them, and you do with them what you will when you remove them, but the important thing is to make sure they're not getting them. And I found quite a few slugs and snails in and around my carrots and my beetroot, and also my brassicas down there as well. I'm making sure I keep track of that. Something else is, as we move down, as things are getting a little bit bigger, the netting on some of my plants is the plants are starting to outgrow the netting. So even though it's later in the year, it's still really important to keep things covered for a whole host of reasons. You've still got the cabbage, the white butterflies that are quite happy to still lay their eggs and produce caterpillars. The birds are still very hungry, and they will munch through your crops if you give them half a chance as well. Something I was going to give you a tip to keep some pests away. You can't stop the whitefly on the brassicas, or if you can, you've beat something that I can't do. But what I do with my kale is I regularly harvest it. So what that means, if I regularly harvest it, it means that it's less likely to take hold. If I can get in here, it's so heavily pinned down. As you can see, I have got a little bit of whitefly on there, but if I regularly harvest it, it means it doesn't really take hold, whereas if you leave it on there for too long, they lay their eggs, they breed more, and so you get more. So I'm going to be taking a little bit of my kale off, and I'm going to be showing you what I'm going to be doing with that later as well in this video. So we still need to keep on check of watering as well. Obviously today the job's been done for me. Now generally speaking, most things that are quite well established don't need that much watering unless it's particularly dry, but the things I'm concentrating on are things like my runner beans, because they need quite a bit of water because they're producing an awful lot of beans, the beetroots and the carrots that aren't quite so far on. So I've got a later lot of carrots and a later lot of beetroots, so I want to keep those well watered so they swell out. And obviously any new plants that you've put in, you know, pay special attention to those. But lots of my established plants, I don't even know the last time I watered my squashes and my courgettes, because they are just doing what they need to do. So just keep an eye on that as well. Remembering to support some of your plants as well. So we had to do a little bit of work on our runner beans because we had some high winds, so we're obviously making sure that they're getting very heavy, so making sure that everything's really well supported. Don't forget to still keep you know, your tomatoes still need tying up. I've got some really big aubergines at home which we'll take a look at later. If you've got some particularly tall brassicas like Brussels, they might need supporting, so really keeping on check of that. Your summer fruiting raspberries, if you want to, you can start cutting back the old canes on those this month. If you've never if you don't know the difference between the two, the summer fruiting ones, you take out the old canes because you get the new fruit on the new canes. So that's a job you can be doing as well. Something else you can be doing this time of year is saving seed from certain plants, and my French beans are the perfect example of this. I've got loads of French beans still coming, but runner beans still coming, and I'm picking those regularly, but these ones are starting to look a bit tired, so you can start to leave these on the plant so the beans fill out, and then they will dry off and you can use them for next year. And you can obviously be saving seed on other things as well, but things like beans and peas are a particularly easy way of doing them because they almost just dry themselves on the plant. I think I've got a better example of some here where actually the pods are starting to actually swell out, and if I leave them on a little bit longer they'll fill out more and they'll actually almost dry off on the plant, and then I'll finish drying them off at home as well. You can be turning over your composter. We haven't done that yet, but that's a job we will be doing because we will be using some of the compost to mulch, and that leads me on to clearing areas that you're not planting. Now at the moment I haven't got any clear areas, but over the coming weeks I'm sure I will be getting some, so it's really good to keep on check of it so you're really ahead for next year, clearing off all the debris, putting it on the composter, taking the weeds out, and I normally pop a little bit of ground cover down just to stop the weeds growing over the winter. I don't use ground cover for lots of things, but if I've got a piece of allotment that's not got anything on it, it just stops the weeds from growing. And we do use something that we recommend. I'll put a link up on the screen and one in the description. We have got an Amazon shop, and I do have to tell you we'll make a little bit of money out of it if you do decide to make a purchase. So we're now back in my home garden, and I'm standing by my lovely tomatoes. Something that I'm harvesting regularly at the moment. Now I have been hearing that a lot of people are not getting their tomatoes to ripen at the moment. I've got a really good video on that, on how you can speed up ripening your tomatoes. It will be up on the screen and will also be in the description. So rather than me going over it all again, please watch that video and it will give you some top tips to get them ripening. So moving on to gluts of things. Now we've all got gluts of things. Now it's really important that you do harvest some things regularly, like your tomatoes as soon as they're ripe, because otherwise they'll go soft. Things like your beans and your courgettes, you need to be regularly harvesting those so more get produced. I've noticed that one of my lettuces has started to bolt. Now if you let it bolt too much, it will get bitter. I can probably get away with that one, but if I let it get any taller, it would start to get bitter. So really keeping on check of those. So moving on to some things that you can be doing with your wonderful gluts of things. Now one thing I would suggest is varying what you do with your gluts of things, because if you do all the same recipe for the same thing, you will get bored of it. Trust me, I have done that and got bored of things well and truly. So do mix it up a little bit. You know, making some lovely preserves, some chutneys and some jams are a really wonderful way of using up those gluts. I've got a fantastic passata recipe for my tomatoes, and I make loads and loads of that. So while you can freeze things, they take an awful lot of room up in the freezer, where I make batches of tomatoes where 2 massive trays of tomatoes will get really reduced down, and it's a really good way of preserving them. Again, I've got a fantastic recipe. I will put a link up on the screen and one in the description if you want to make that fantastic recipe that I absolutely adore. Something else you can be doing is you can be making all sorts of weird and wonderful things just by googling stuff and looking up some really excellent recipes of things you can be doing. I've got a fantastic courgette recipe, which again we will put a link up on the screen and one in the description for my fantastic chocolate courgette cake, which is absolutely amazing. And something else that I do that helps me preserve some of my produce is I dry things in a dehydrator. So let's move on and I'll show you what my dehydrator looks like. So this is my dehydrator. It's an Andrew James one, and when I got this, I looked at all the different types of dehydrators out there. Now the Excalibur is obviously the gold standard of dehydrators, but it costs a ridiculous amount of money. This is a far more modest purchase, and it does exactly what I need it to do. And I dry all sorts of things in this. Today I'm going to be doing some chips or crisps or whatever you want to call them. I'm not going to go through it all on here, but basically I just slice them really thinly. I cover them with a little bit of oil and salt, and I lay them in individual layers in my dehydrator. If you want to see how the dehydrator works, I have got a video which will be up on the screen, and it will also be in the description, where I'll talk more in detail on how the dehydrator works and how you can get one. So this moves me on very neatly to what you can sow in September, and there really are quite a lot of things you can sow, and they do germinate really quickly. Only a week ago I sowed a whole selection of things here. I've got radishes, I've got kale, I've got some oriental greens. There's a whole host of things that you can be sowing now, and I have a video very aptly for that, which will be up on the screen and also in the description, when you can look at what you can sow in the month of September.